He forced his wife to sign unfair terms. Then her CEO brother revealed the truth. Vivian, what are you doing here? I told you to go to the guest house. You are embarrassing me. Get back inside. I will have security escort you out the back. Do you have any idea who is watching? Let go of her. Damien froze. The voice behind him was cold, powerful, dangerous. He turned to see a man in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car, standing inches away. The boredom was gone from the man's face. Now there was only violence. Mr. Blackwood, this is my soon-to-be ex-wife. She is mentally unstable. She is stalking me. I apologize for this domestic disturbance. The man looked at Damien's hand gripping Vivian's arm. Then he looked directly into Damien's eyes. Let go, my sister. The silence on that sidewalk was deafening. Traffic seemed to stop. Birds went quiet. Damien dropped his hand as if he had been burned. You're your sister? Vivian took off her sunglasses. She looked at her husband with eyes that held absolutely zero affection. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to Stories with M.R. Parker. May God Almighty lift up every woman watching this video who has ever been made to feel small. Every woman who sacrificed her identity for love. Every woman who has been underestimated, undervalued, and overlooked. Remind her today that her worth is not determined by how others treat her. Restore her confidence. Heal her heart. In Jesus' name, amen. Before we dive deep into this story, I'm Mr. Parker, and I will love to know where you are watching from. If you're new to this channel, you just found your new favorite storytelling family. Hit that subscribe button right now, because Stories with Mr. Parker brings you real-life lessons wrapped in unforgettable narratives. I promise you, the moment Damien realizes who his wife really is, it is absolutely priceless. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. For years, 2 months, and 17 days, that is exactly how long Vivian Crane had been keeping score. Not because she was petty, but because pain has a way of making you count. Every single day she woke up in the Beaumont estate, she was reminded that she did not belong. The reminders came in whispers at charity luncheons, in the way Damien's mother Colette looked at her, in the coldness of the marble floors beneath her feet as she walked through a house that never became a home. But let's go back further. Back to when Vivian still believed in fairy tales. She was 26 years old, working as a manager of a small art gallery in Sacramento. It was not glamorous. The gallery was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a dry cleaner. But Vivian loved it. She loved talking to artists, curating shows for local talent, watching someone's face light up when their work sold for the first time. She wore thrift store blazers and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. She made $32,000 a year and lived in a studio apartment with a view of a parking lot. And she was happy, genuinely happy. What no one knew, what Vivian never told anyone, was that the gallery was one of 17 owned by the Archambault Collective. And Vivian was not just a manager. She was Marguerite Archambault's goddaughter, her chosen heir, being trained from the ground up to one day run an empire worth billions. Vivian's parents had died in a car accident when she was 8 years old. Marguerite, her mother's closest friend, had raised her in Paris, then New York, then London. Vivian had attended the best schools. She spoke 5 languages. She had degrees from the Sorbonne and Columbia. By 24, she was sitting on the boards of luxury brands most people only read about in magazines. But Marguerite had taught her something important. Know the business from the bottom up. Understand every role. Value every person. So Vivian had spent 2 years managing the Sacramento Gallery, learning, working, living like everyone else. But there was another reason Vivian hid her identity. She wanted to know if someone could love her for herself. Not for her last name. Not for her trust fund. Not for the doors she could open or the world she could provide access to. Just her. That is why. On a Saturday morning in June, when a handsome man in an expensive linen shirt stopped at her booth at the local farmer's market, Vivian introduced herself as just Vivian Crane, gallery manager, art lover, nobody special. Damien Beaumont had smiled at her like she was the sun breaking through clouds. You're refreshing, he had said, biting into the peach he had just bought. Everyone in my world is so polished, so fake. You are real. She had laughed. You don't even know me. I want to, he had said. And God help her. She had believed him. The courtship was a whirlwind. Damien told her he was a vintner, that his family owned a vineyard in Napa Valley. He did not tell her it was 400 acres of prime real estate, producing some of California's most prestigious wines. He played it down, made it sound modest. Small family business. Vivian had appreciated that. She thought he was being humble. She did not realize he was testing her, making sure she was not a gold digger before he revealed the extent of his wealth. 3 months later, he took her to Beaumont Estate for the first time. The long driveway lined with oak trees. The main house with its Portuguese tile and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking endless rows of vines. The wine cellar that was worth more than most people's houses. Vivian had been impressed, but not overwhelmed. After all, she had grown up in a penthouse in Paris and a brownstone in Manhattan. But she played the part. Wide-eyed, a little intimidated, grateful. That was the day she met Colette Beaumont. Damien's mother had been standing on the terrace in head-to-toe cream, a Hermes scarf knotted at her throat, diamond earrings catching the afternoon light. She had looked at Vivian, the way someone examines a stain on expensive fabric. So you were the gallery girl, Colette had said. It was not a question. It was a categorization. Vivian had extended her hand. It is wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Beaumont. Damien has told me so much about you. Colette had taken her hand limply, barely shaking it. How quaint. A gallery in Sacramento. And what did you study, dear? Art history. At Sacramento State. The lie had come smoothly. Vivian had indeed studied art history, but at Columbia, with a semester at the Sorbonne. But she was committed to the test, to being ordinary, to being loved for who she was, not what she had. Colette's smile had been sharp. Well, I suppose not everyone can attend the prestigious schools. At least you are employed. So many young women today have no work ethic. It was a first cut, small, precise, designed to sting without leaving a visible mark. Vivian had smiled through it. There would be thousands more cuts over the next 4 years. Damien had proposed 6 months after they met. A sunset proposal in the vineyard, a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. Vivian had said yes because she loved him, because he had been kind and attentive and had told her she was everything he had been looking for. Something real, something authentic. The wedding was small by Beaumont standards. Colette made it clear that she thought it was too soon, that Damien barely knew this girl, that she had concerns. But Damien had insisted, and Vivian had worn a simple dress and married a man she loved in a ceremony surrounded by grapevines. The trouble started immediately. On their honeymoon in Tuscany, Damien had asked her to sign a prenuptial agreement. I know we are already married, he had said, looking sheepish, but my mother insists. It is just a formality. It protects the estate. You understand. Vivian had understood. And because she had her own fortune, one that dwarfed his, she had signed without reading it carefully. She did not care about his money. She had her own. When they returned to California, Colette had informed Vivian that they would be living at the main estate, not in a separate house as Damien had suggested. We are family, Colette had said. Families stay together. Besides, the estate needs a woman's touch. God knows I cannot manage everything myself. What Colette actually meant was that she needed someone to manage the things she found beneath her. And Vivian, desperate to be accepted, had agreed. The first year, Vivian tried everything. She learned to cook Damien's favorite meals. She studied wine, memorizing varietals and vintages, and tasting notes. She worked the harvest alongside the seasonal laborers, her hands blistering from pruning shears. She organized the annual Vintners Gala, a massive event that raised money for local charities and brought influential people from San Francisco and beyond. Colette had criticized every single thing. The cocoa vin was too salty. Vivian's knowledge of wine was superficial, pedestrian. Her work in the vineyard was performative, embarrassing. The gala was adequate, but lacked sophistication. Damien had said nothing. He had simply shrugged and told Vivian that his mother was particular, that she would come around eventually, that Vivian just needed to try harder. So Vivian tried harder. The second year, Damien's father Laurent had a massive stroke. He survived, but he was incapacitated. The entire estate fell into chaos. Colette was too distraught to function. Damien was overwhelmed trying to manage the business side while caring for his father. The harvest was happening. 63 seasonal workers needing direction, distributors demanding their orders, everything falling apart. Vivian had stepped in. She had managed the entire harvest. She woke at 5 in the morning and worked until midnight. She coordinated the workers. She handled the paperwork. When the distributor threatened to pull out because the invoicing was a disaster, Vivian had spent 3 days reconstructing the accounting and saved the contract. When it was over, when the wine was made and the orders fulfilled and the crisis averted, Colette had patted Vivian's hand and said, "Well done, dear. You made yourself useful. Not thank you. Not we could not have done this without you. Useful, like a tool, like an appliance." Damien had kissed her forehead and said, "I knew I could count on you, babe." And that was it. No acknowledgement of the 60-hour weeks. No recognition that she had saved their entire season. Just expectation. Just assumption. Just, of course you did that. That is what you are here for. The third year was when Vivian started to notice the distance. Damien was coming home later. He smelled like perfume that was not hers. He was on his phone constantly, texting someone, smiling at the screen in a way he had not smiled at her in months. Vivian had told herself she was imagining it, that she was being paranoid, that she just needed to be a better wife. But then came the night of the Vintners Association dinner. Vivian had worn a dress she had bought herself. Nothing designer, just something pretty from a department store. She had done her own hair and makeup. She had been excited, thinking maybe this would be a nice night out with her husband. At the dinner, Damien had introduced her to colleagues as, "This is my wife. She helps out around this state." Helps out, like she was a part-time assistant. Like she had not saved their harvest, managed their events, kept their household running while his mother drank wine and criticized. Later that night, Vivian had excused herself to the restroom. She had locked herself in a stall and cried for 10 minutes, trying to keep quiet, trying not to let anyone hear. When she came out, her eyes were red. A woman at the sink, someone Vivian vaguely recognized from the wine community, had given her a sympathetic look and said, "The Beaumonts are a difficult family. I hope you have a thick skin." Vivian had smiled and said she was fine. Just allergies. But she was not fine. The fourth year, Vivian hired a private investigator. She hated herself for it, felt like she was betraying her marriage, but she needed to know. The late nights, the perfume, the distance. She needed to know if she was crazy or if her instincts were right. The investigator came back with photos. Damien and a woman named Claudette, a sommelier from San Francisco. Restaurants, hotels, dates and timestamps. An affair that had been going on for 8 months. Vivian had sat in her car in a parking lot, looking at the photos on her phone, and felt something inside her crystallize. Not heartbreak, though that was there, but something harder, colder, a realization. She had spent 4 years making herself smaller, quieter, more palatable, and it had not mattered. Damien had still cheated. Colette still treated her like help. She was still invisible in her own marriage. That night, Vivian had pulled out the burner phone she had kept hidden since her wedding day, just in case, just if she ever needed it. She had not called the number in 4 years, but she had kept it, a lifeline back to who she really was. She did not call, not yet, because part of her still hoped, still thought, maybe if she confronted Damien, maybe if they went to counseling, maybe if she just tried one more time. So she had tried. She had sent Damien emails, vulnerable and raw, begging him to go to therapy with her, asking him what she had done wrong, asking him to help her fix their marriage. He had replied to one email, "Viv, you are being dramatic. We are fine. I am just busy with work. Stop being so needy." Colette had noticed Vivian's distress and had suggested a therapist. Someone from our circle, dear. Someone who understands people like us. You have seemed so unstable lately. I think you need help. Vivian had gone. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Henley, had listened to Vivian pour out her heart. The loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, the suspicion about the affair. And Dr. Henley had nodded and taken notes, and at the end said, "It sounds like you are struggling with some insecurities and paranoia. That is quite common for women who marry above their station. The anxiety of not feeling deserving can manifest in these ways." Vivian had left that appointment feeling like she was losing her mind. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe she was insecure. Maybe this was all in her head. It was not until later that she realized Dr. Henley was Colette's friend, that the therapy notes were being shared, that her vulnerability was being weaponized. Which brings us to the morning of their 4th anniversary. Vivian had woken up early. She had made Damien's favorite breakfast: blueberry pancakes, turkey bacon, fresh squeezed orange juice. She had set the table in the sunroom with flowers from the garden. She had been hopeful, foolishly, desperately hopeful. Maybe today he would remember. Maybe today would be different. Damien had walked in at 9:30, showered and dressed in a tailored suit. He had barely glanced at the table. "I have a meeting at 11, he had said, pouring himself coffee. "Make it quick." Vivian's heart had sunk. "Do you know what today is?" "Wednesday." "It is our anniversary, Damien." He had looked up then, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Then it was gone. "Right. For years." "Look, Viv, actually the timing is perfect. I need you to sign something." He had pulled a document from his briefcase and slid it across the table. It landed on top of her untouched pancakes. "What is this?" she had asked. "A post-nuptial agreement. An amendment to the prenup. My lawyers drew it up. It just clarifies some things. Protects the estate." Vivian had picked up the document with shaking hands. As she read, the words blurred, then sharpened, then became unbearably clear. Clause 4. In the event of separation, the secondary party, Vivian Crane Beaumont, receives 0 alimony if the marriage lasts fewer than 5 years. Clause 7. The secondary party agrees to vacate all Beaumont properties within 48 hours of separation. Clause 12. The secondary party forfeits any claim to assets acquired during the marriage, including but not limited to real estate, business holdings, and investment portfolios. Clause 18. The secondary party agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all Beaumont family business matters, with a penalty of $10 million for breach of contract. Vivian had looked up at her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had erased herself for. "This says I get nothing." "You brought nothing," Damien had said. He said it casually, matter of fact, like it was obvious. "Look, Viv, let's be real. When we met, you were making what, $30,000 a year. You were living in a studio apartment. I gave you all of this. The house, the lifestyle, the access to a world you never could have entered on your own. This agreement just protects what my family built. It is only fair." "Fair? You have not exactly contributed financially. The estate, the business, the wealth, that is all Beaumont legacy. You have been supportive, and I appreciate that, but wifely duties are not the same as actual contribution." Vivian had felt something snap inside her chest. When your father had his stroke and the entire harvest was in jeopardy, who managed it? When your PR crisis happened last year and your whole team quit, who wrote the press releases? When your mother needed full-time care after her hip surgery, who was there? Those were supporting roles. Viv. Helpful, sure, but hardly worth 50% of a $100 million estate. The sunroom door had opened. Heels clicked on the tile floor. Colette Beaumont entered, dressed impeccably as always, carrying her Birkin bag like a weapon. "Is it done?" she had asked, not even greeting Vivian. "Damien, the lawyers at the firm are waiting for confirmation. We need this liability cleared before the Archibald meeting." "I am handling it, Mother," Damien had said, annoyed. Vivian had looked between them. "The Archibald meeting?" Colette had turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Did he not tell you? The Archibald Collective is considering acquiring Beaumont Estate. It would be the opportunity of a lifetime. Marguerite Archibald is coming tomorrow to tour the property." The name had hit Vivian like a physical blow. Marguerite, her godmother, coming here. "If this partnership happens," Colette had continued, "we will be part of the most prestigious luxury portfolio in the world." Chateau Beauséjour, Villa Montefiore, the Laurent Hotel Group. We would be untouchable. Damien would have the resources to expand internationally. This is generational wealth. Legacy. And I will not allow it to be jeopardized by a girl from Sacramento with delusions of grandeur, suddenly deciding she deserves half of what we built. Vivian's hands had been shaking. And if I do not sign, Collett's smile had been cruel. Then, dear, we proceed with the alternative. We have documentation of your mental instability. Dr. Henley has been very cooperative. We have emails you sent Damien, begging, pleading, borderline threatening. We have witnesses who will testify to your erratic behavior. You mean when I cried in the bathroom at the gala after being humiliated? We mean your ongoing breakdown. Colette had said smoothly, contest this agreement, and we will have you declared mentally unfit. You will leave with nothing, and your name will be so damaged you will never work in any respectable establishment again. Who will hire the unstable woman who tried to extort the Beaumont family? Vivian had looked at Damien. Say something. Tell her this is insane. But Damien had just checked his watch. Viv, just sign it. Do not be dramatic. I have the Archambault meeting to prepare for. Marguerite Archambault is business royalty. Her goddaughter is coming with her. Some prodigy she has been grooming to take over the collective. These are people who actually matter in the world. I cannot have any distractions. People who actually matter. Vivian had picked up the pen. Her hand was not trembling anymore. It was steady, cold, certain. You want stability? She had thought. You want to impress Marguerite Archambault? Be careful what you wish for. She had signed her name at the bottom. Not Vivian Beaumont. Vivian Crane. Damien had snatched the paper before the ink dried. He had not even looked at the signature. Finally, he had said, Mother, get this to legal. I need to get to the office. What about me? Vivian had asked quietly. Damien had grabbed his briefcase. Pack a bag. You are moving to the guest house on the north end of the property for a few days. I need you out of sight while the Archambault people are here. I cannot have you serving lemonade or making small talk and embarrassing the family. Just stay out of the way. He had walked out without looking back, without saying happy anniversary, without a shred of recognition that he had just destroyed their marriage on the day they were supposed to celebrate it. Colette had paused at the door, giving Vivian one last triumphant smile. You should have known your place. Dear, pretty girls from nowhere marry men like my son in fairy tales. This is the real world. Then she was gone. Vivian had stood in the empty sunroom, surrounded by the breakfast she had made, the flowers she had picked, the hope she had carried, and she had felt it all burn away, not into sadness, into something far more powerful. Clarity. She had pulled out her phone. Not her iPhone. The other one. The one she kept hidden in a hollowed-out book in the library for 4 years. Just in case. She had dialed a number. It rang twice. This is the private office of Marguerite Archambault. A British accent. Crisp. Professional. Patricia. Patricia, Vivian had said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. With rage. With relief. With 4 years of being invisible finally coming to an end. It is Vivian. There had been a pause. Then, warmer. Miss Crane, we have been waiting for your call. Is she available? For you? Always. A click. A transfer. And then the voice Vivian had not heard in 4 years. Warm. Cultured. Carrying the faintest trace of a French accent. Mon petit cho, Marguerite Archambault had said. Tell me you are finally ready to come home. Vivian had closed her eyes. Tears had come then. Real ones. Not the silent ones she had cried into her pillow for years. But tears of release. Moraine, she had whispered. Godmother. They tried to erase me. I know, darling. Marguerite's voice had hardened like steel wrapped in silk. I have had people watching. I have seen enough. The question is, do you want mercy or justice? Vivian had thought of Damien's dismissive wave. Collett's cruel smile. For years of being told she did not matter. For years of making herself small. Justice, she had said. Good girl. Marguerite had sounded proud. I arrive tomorrow at 2 o'clock for this state tour. I am bringing my goddaughter, the one I have been telling the Beaumonts about, the one inheriting the collective. A pause. Loaded. Significant. They do not know you are her, do they? No. Perfect. Marguerite's smile had been audible, where the Dior, the Navy won, and Vivian, the Beaumonts wanted to impress me to secure their future. Instead, they are going to learn what happens when you humiliate someone I love. See you tomorrow, ma chérie. The line had gone dead. Vivian had stood in the sunroom, looking around at the perfect furniture, the perfect flowers, the perfect prison she had been living in. She had not packed for the guest house. Instead, she had gone to her closet, to the very back, to a locked trunk she had brought with her 4 years ago. The trunk Damien had never asked about. The trunk Colette had assumed was full of sentimental junk from her nobody life in Sacramento. Vivian had opened it. Inside was her real wardrobe. The navy Dior suit tailored to perfection. A vintage Patek Philippe watch that had belonged to her grandmother, worth $200,000. Hermes scarves. Louboutin heels. Pearl earrings that were family heirlooms, passed down from a dynasty the Beaumonts could never dream of buying into. She had pulled out the Dior suit and held it up to the light. It still fit perfectly. Of course it did. She had never really changed. She had just been pretending. Tomorrow, she had thought, everything changes. Tomorrow, they see who I really am. Tomorrow, justice. If you are feeling the tension right now, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me, what do you think is going to happen when Damien realizes who Vivian really is? I want to hear your predictions. And if you are rooting for Vivian right now, if you want to see her get the justice she deserves, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that underestimating people can be a dangerous game. Stay with me until the end because I promise you, the look on Damien's face when the truth comes out is absolutely priceless. Now, let's get to the moment you have been waiting for. The morning of the Archambault visit, Beaumont Estate was in control chaos. Colette Beaumont moved through the main house like a general inspecting troops before battle. She had hired an additional cleaning crew to ensure every surface gleamed. The gardeners had been working since dawn to make sure the rose gardens were pristine. In the tasting room, bottles of their finest vintages were lined up like soldiers. The 2015 Reserve Cabernet that had won double gold at the San Francisco International Wine Competition. The 2012 Estate Merlot that Wine Spectator had rated 94 points. The Archambault Collective does not just buy vineyards. Colette had explained to Damien for the 15th time that morning. They curate legacy brands. If Marguerite Archambault adds us to her portfolio, we will be in the same family as Chateau Beaujour in Burgundy, Villa Montefiore in Tuscany, the Laurent Hotel Group. This is immortality, Damien. Everything your great-great-grandfather built, secured for the next century. Damien had nodded, checking his reflection in the antique mirror in the foyer. He wore Tom Ford, charcoal gray, open collar that said successful but approachable. His hair was perfect. He looked like the future of California wine country. He felt ready. What do we know about the goddaughter? He had asked. The one who is supposedly taking over the collective? Colette had frowned. Very little. Marguerite is famously private about her personal life. All we know is that she has been training her heir for years. Someone she considers family. Apparently the girl is brilliant. Speaks 5 languages. Has degrees from the Sorbonne and Columbia. Sits on the boards of half the luxury brands in their portfolio. Age? Late 20s, early 30s. Unmarried, reportedly. Very serious, very polished. Marguerite refers to her as the future of the company. Damien had felt a small flutter of interest. Attractive? Colette had given him a sharp look. Damien, you are still technically married, even if it is ending. Besides, a woman like that is so far above. What I mean is, she has been raised in true international society. She would not be interested in provincial vineyard owner, even one as successful as you. Just be charming, be knowledgeable, and let me handle the business negotiations. At 1:45, the crunch of tires on gravel announced the arrival. Damien and Colette had positioned themselves on the front steps of the estate, a calculated choice that made visitors look up at them. A subtle power play. But when the vehicles came into view, Damien's confidence had faltered. 3 cars. 2 Mercedes S-Class sedans, matte black with tinted windows. And between them, a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom in midnight blue that probably cost more than Damien's entire car collection. The cars did not park in the circular drive. They stopped at the bottom of the steps. Engines running. A driver emerged from the first Mercedes. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit and an earpiece. Security. He opened the rear door of the Rolls-Royce. The woman who emerged made Colette's carefully curated elegance look like a costume. Marguerite Archambault was 73 years old and magnificent. She wore a cream silk suit that was definitely vintage Chanel, possibly from the 1970s, fitted perfectly to her slim frame. Her white hair was pulled back in a classic chignon. Pearls at her throat. Real ones. The kind with slight irregularities that marked them as natural and priceless. She moved with the unhurried grace of someone who had never been kept waiting in her life. Mrs. Archambault, Colette had gushed, descending the steps with her arms outstretched. What an honor. Welcome to Beaumont Estates. We are so thrilled. Mrs. Beaumont, Marguerite had interrupted smoothly. Her accent was barely noticeable, but added gravity to every word. Thank you for receiving us. Before we begin, I am waiting for one more member of my party. Of course, Damien had said, turning on his most charming smile. Your goddaughter? We are very eager to meet her. Are you? Marguerite's eyes, sharp and gray as winter rain, had fixed on him. How interesting. A second car door had opened, and Vivian stepped out. Damien had blinked. For a moment, his brain could not process what he was seeing. It was like looking at a stranger who happened to have his wife's face. She was dressed in a navy Dior suit he had never seen before, tailored to absolute perfection. The kind of cut that cost 5 figures and required multiple fittings. Her hair, usually in a simple ponytail, was styled in a sleek low bun. She wore minimal jewelry, pearl earrings, a slim watch that Damien recognized with jolt. It was a vintage Patek Philippe, women's model from the 1960s, worth easily $200,000. She walked differently, head up, shoulders back, moving with quiet authority that Damien had never seen in 4 years of marriage. She walked to Marguerite's side, and the older woman's entire face had transformed with warmth. Ah, there you are, Moncho, Marguerite had said, kissing both of Vivian's cheeks. I was just telling the Beaumonts we were waiting for you. Vivian had smiled, not the tentative, apologetic smile Damien knew. Something cooler, more dangerous. Moraine, she had said to Marguerite. Godmother. Then she had turned to Damien and Colette. Hello, Damien. Hello, Colette. Colette's face had gone white. The color drained so fast, it was like watching time-lapse photography. Her mouth opened, closed, open again. Vivian? What are you doing here? You are supposed to be at the North Guest House. I specifically told you. I gave you clear instructions. Vivian's smile had not wavered. I am here because Marguerite Archambault is my godmother. I am here because I have been the executive director of acquisitions for the Archambault Collective for the past 4 years, working remotely so I could try to save my marriage. And I am here because as of 6 months ago, Marguerite officially named me as her successor and heir to the entire collective. The silence was absolute. A hummingbird darted past. Somewhere in the distance, a tractor hummed in the vineyard. But on the front steps of Beaumont Estate, there was only shocked, suffocating silence. Damien's mouth had opened, but no sound came out. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. You, Colette had stammered. Her carefully maintained composure was cracking like ice under pressure. That is impossible. Your name is Vivian Crane. You are from Sacramento. You worked at a gallery. I worked at the Archambault Gallery, Sacramento. Vivian corrected gently. One of 17 galleries owned by the collective. I was managing it as part of my training. Learning the business from the ground up. Marguerite believes in practical experience. I was 26. I wanted to know if someone could love me for myself, not for my connections or my future. So I told people I was just an employee. I wore thrift store clothes. I drove a used Honda. She had looked at Damien then, really looked at him, and her eyes were full of something between pity and contempt. And then, I met you at that farmer's market. You were so charming. You told me you wanted something real, that you were tired of the superficial wine country social scene. You said you wanted a woman with substance, not just pedigree. Vivian, Damien had started. His voice cracked. The first year was good. Vivian had continued, as if he had not spoken. You introduced me to your family as your authentic California girl. They hated me on sight, but I thought love would be enough. I thought if I worked hard, if I proved myself, they would accept me. So I learned everything about this estate. I pruned vines. I mucked out fermentation tanks. I smiled through your mother's insults. And I did not tell you the truth because I kept thinking, tomorrow he will love me enough. Tomorrow it will not matter. Marguerite had placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder. The gesture was protective, fierce. But they never loved you enough. Did they, Sherry? No, Vivian had said softly. They did not. Colette had found her voice. Brittle. Defensive. This is absurd. If you are really Marguerite Archibald's heir, why would you live like a servant for 4 years? Why would you tolerate being treated like trash? Vivian had finished. Because I kept hoping Damien would choose me, that his family would see my worth. But this morning, when you handed me that post-nuptial agreement that valued 4 years of my life at $0 and 48 hours notice, I realized something. She had looked at Damien. Her voice had hardened. You were never going to see me. None of you were. To you, I will always be the nobody from Sacramento. So I called my godmother and told her I was ready to stop playing make-believe. Damien's face had gone from white to red. Anger was replacing shock. You've been lying to me for 4 years? You have been secretly rich this whole time, and you just let us. I have been secretly myself. Vivian had corrected. You are the one who made assumptions. You are the one who built an entire narrative about the poor girl you rescued. I just stopped correcting you. Marguerite had stepped forward then. Her presence commanded attention without effort. Shall we move this discussion inside? Or would you prefer to have your neighbors hear about your family's financial irregularities from the driveway? Colette had jerked as if slapped. Financial irregularities? We run a clean operation. This is respected. You have been filing falsified organic certification documents for 3 years. Vivian had said quietly, I found them in the estate office when you sent me to fetch your reading glasses last spring. You've been labeling non-organic grapes as organic and charging premium prices. That is fraud, Colette, the kind that comes with federal fines and prison time. You have no proof. Colette had hissed, but her voice shook. I have photographs of the documents. Vivian had said, I have testimony from workers you paid under the table to use non-approved pesticides. I have purchase orders for prohibited chemicals. I had a lot of free time while you were at your spa days and charity luncheons. I used it productively. Damien had grabbed Vivian's arm then. Roughly, his fingers dug into her bicep. This is insane. You cannot just. The security guard from the Mercedes had moved. He was suddenly there, his hand on Damien's wrist, applying pressure that made Damien yelp and release Vivian's arm immediately. Do not touch her, Marguerite had said. Her voice was cold as January frost. Not ever again. Vivian had smoothed her sleeve where Damien had wrinkled the fabric. Let us go inside. I believe you wanted to give us a tour of the estate. I am very interested to see the books. All of them, including the ones you did not want the auditors to see. The dining room of Beaumont Estate had hosted senators, celebrities, and wine industry titans. The long mahogany table could seat 24. The chandelier overhead was baccarat crystal, original to the house's 1925 construction. Today, it felt like an execution chamber. Marguerite had sat at the head of the table. Colette's usual seat. The power dynamic was immediately clear. Vivian sat to her right. 2 additional members of the Archibald team had joined them. A sharp-eyed woman introduced as a collective's chief legal counsel, and a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses identified as a forensic accountant. Damien and Colette sat on the opposite side, flanked by their own lawyer, a local attorney named Brennan, who was visibly out of his depth. He kept adjusting his tie. His forehead was shiny with sweat. Let us establish the facts. Marguerite had begun. She folded her hands on the table. The gesture was almost casual, but her eyes were steel. The Archambault Collective has been considering acquiring Beaumont Estates as part of our North American luxury wine portfolio. We conducted preliminary due diligence. What we found was concerning. Our books are clean, Colette had said, but her voice wavered. Your official books are clean, the forensic accountant had said. He opened his laptop and turned the screen around. Spreadsheets, bank transfers, highlighted figures in red. The shadow accounts are another story. For the past 3 years, Beaumont Estates has been running a secondary operation. You have been purchasing bulk wine from Central Valley producers, cheaper grapes, lower quality, and blending it into your premium labels. Specifically, your reserve Cabernet is approximately 30% bulk wine from Lodi, not estate-grown fruit. Damien's face had gone gray. That is not. We have the purchase orders, Vivian had said softly. I found them in the cellar office. You were sloppy, Damien. You left the files in a box marked Archive Festival Supplies. I was looking for decorations for the Harvest Gala last year and found them instead. You've been spying on us. Colette had spat. I have been living with you. Vivian had corrected. There is a difference. You treated me like part of the furniture, something without eyes or ears or brain. You discussed business at the dinner table, in the car, in the tasting room while I was polishing glasses. You never imagined I understood what I was hearing, or that I would care. The lawyer, Brennan, had cleared his throat. His hands were shaking slightly. Even if these allegations were true, which my clients deny, what does this have to do with the acquisition? Marguerite had smiled then. It was not a kind smile. Everything, Mr. Brennan. You see, we were not planning a partnership. We were planning a takeover. The Archambault Collective does not work with fraudsters. We buy them out at drastically reduced prices, and then we clean house. She had slid a document across the table. It landed in front of Damien with a soft sound that seemed loud in the tense room. This is our offer. We are purchasing Beaumont Estates for $20 million. That is approximately 40 cents on the dollar of your assessed value. That is theft. Colette had shrieked. Her composure was completely gone now. Her face was red. Her hands clutched at her pearls like they were a lifeline. That is generous. The legal counsel had countered. Her voice was calm, professional, deadly. Given that we could instead provide all this evidence to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the Federal Trade Commission, and the local district attorney. Organic certification fraud carries fines up to $500,000 per violation. We have documented at least 60 violations. That is $30 million in fines alone, not including criminal charges. Damien had looked like he might be sick. The color had drained from his face again. His hands gripped the edge of the table. You cannot do this. We can, and we are, Vivian had said. She opened her own folder, pulled out papers, slid them across the table with deliberate calm. Here is the timeline. You sign over the estate to Archambault Collective today. You will retain a minority stake, 15%, and you will step down from all operational roles. My godmother will install new management. What about mother? Damien had asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Colette will resign from all positions and sell her shares to the collective. Marguerite had said. She will be compensated fairly, but she will have no further role in the business. Colette had looked like she had been struck. This estate has been in my family through marriage for 40 years. You cannot just take it from me. You took 4 years of my life, Vivian had said quietly, but her voice filled the room. You took my confidence, my sense of self-worth, my belief that I could be loved. You made me feel worthless every single day. You mocked my education, my background, my clothes, my voice. You told me I was lucky to marry your son, that I should be grateful for scraps of affection. Her voice had not risen, but it carried weight. For years of compressed pain, for years of swallowed hurt, for years of being invisible. This morning, you made me sign an agreement that said I had earned nothing, contributed nothing, deserved nothing. You were ready to throw me out like trash. So yes, Colette, I can take your estate. And I will. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Each tick seemed to count down to the inevitable. Damien had looked at the papers, then at Vivian. If I refuse, then we go public with everything. Marguerite had said, the fraud, the organic violations, and, most interestingly, the affair. Damien had frozen. What affair? Vivian had pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, slid it across the table. Photographs. Damien and Claudette at a restaurant in San Francisco. Damien and Claudette leaving a hotel in Sonoma. Dates, times, locations, all documented. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago, Vivian had said. When you started coming home late smelling like someone else's perfume and telling me you were at supplier meetings. Claudette is lovely, by the way. I spoke to her last week. She had no idea you were still married. She thought you were divorced. Apparently, you told her I was unstable and you were just waiting for the paperwork to finalize. Damien could not speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. So here is your choice, Vivian had continued. Sign the estate over to Archambault Collective. Take your 15% and whatever personal wealth you have managed not to spend on your mistress. Walk away quietly. Or fight us. And I will make sure every wine publication, every industry blog, and every society page knows exactly what kind of man you are and what kind of operation you've been running. She had leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. Your family built this estate over 5 generations. You destroyed it in 3 years. I am offering you a chance to salvage something. I suggest you take it. Damien had picked up the pen with a shaking hand. His face was pale, defeated. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. In its place was just a man who had underestimated the wrong woman and lost everything because of it. Where do I sign? He had whispered. Vivian had pointed. There, and there, an initial here. The pen had scratched across the paper. Each signature was a surrender. Each initial was an admission. When it was done, Damien had pushed the papers away like they burned to touch. Colette had been crying silently, tears running down her face, ruining her makeup, but she had not made a sound. Pride, even in defeat. Marguerite had gathered the papers, placed them in her folder, stood with the grace of someone who had just concluded a successful business transaction, not destroyed a family's legacy. We will have our team here by the end of the week, she had said. You have until Friday to remove your personal belongings from the main house. The estate itself remains operational. The workers will keep their jobs. In fact, we will be hiring more staff and paying them better wages. This vineyard has good bones. It just needs honest management. She had looked at Colette. Mrs. Beaumont, our lawyers will be in touch regarding the sale of your shares. I suggest you cooperate fully. Then Marguerite had turned to Vivian. Ready, ma chérie? Vivian had stood. She had looked around the dining room one last time, at the table where she had sat through countless uncomfortable dinners, at the chandelier she had cleaned, at the windows overlooking the vineyard she had worked. She felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, just a vast, peaceful emptiness where pain used to live. I am ready, she had said. As they walked toward the door, Damien had called out. His voice was broken, desperate. Viv, wait, please. Vivian had paused, but she had not turned around. I am sorry, he had said. I never meant to. You never meant to see me, Vivian had said. And you never did. Goodbye, Damien. She had walked out of Beaumont Estate, for the last time, her head high, her heart, for the first time in 4 years, light. If you're feeling satisfied right now, hit that like button. Seriously, if you believe in karma, if you believe that people reap what they sow, smash that like button right now. And I have a question for you. Have you ever had a moment where someone underestimated you and you got to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I love hearing from you. This story is not over yet. The transformation is just beginning. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their worth. Someone who has been made to feel small. Someone who needs to know that their value is not determined by how others treat them. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because 2 months later, something beautiful happened. 2 months after the takeover, the newly renovated Archambault Gallery in San Francisco was hosting its opening night gala. The event drew collectors, artists, and cultural figures from across the country. The space was magnificent. Soaring ceilings with exposed beams. Perfect track lighting that made every piece of art look museum quality. Walls displaying works from emerging and established artists. The crowd was sophisticated but not stuffy. People actually talked about the art, not just the price tags. Vivian stood near the entrance, greeting guests. She wore a vintage Yves Saint Laurent gown. Black, elegant, devastating in its simplicity. Her hair was down, softly curled around her shoulders. She looked relaxed in a way she had not in years. She smiled easily, laughed genuinely. She looked like someone who had finally come home to herself. Quite a turnout, Marguerite had said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to Vivian. You have done extraordinary work here, ma chérie. This gallery will be the crown jewel of our West Coast operations. Thank you, Moraine. Vivian had clinked her glass against her godmother's. For everything. For waiting for me to be ready. For not pushing me to come back before I was ready. You needed to learn that lesson yourself, Marguerite had said gently. I could not teach it to you. You had to discover your own worth, separate from my name and my money. I just wish it had not taken 4 years of humiliation to figure it out. We take the time we need. Marguerite's eyes, wise and kind, had studied her goddaughter, and you got something valuable from those years. You learned exactly who you are and what you will not tolerate. That is priceless knowledge. Vivian had smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine and free. Have you heard from Damien? Marguerite had asked. He sent an email last week, asking if we could talk. Clear the air. I did not respond. Good. Marguerite had nodded approvingly. He had his chance to know you. He chose not to take it. She had paused, sipping her champagne. And the estate? Thriving. Vivian had said. The new management team found the old vines that Colette had been neglecting. Original plantings from the 1920s. We are doing a limited release vintage using only those grapes. Fully organic. Complete transparency about sourcing. The pre-orders are extraordinary. Will you put the Beaumont name on it? Vivian had considered. No, I am calling it Crane Vineyard. My name, my legacy. Marguerite's smile could have lit the room. Perfect. A young man had approached then, tall with kind eyes and an easy smile. He wore a well-cut suit, but there were paint stains on his fingers that suggested he had come straight from a studio. Miss Crane, I am Daniel Torres. My work is in the contemporary section. I just wanted to thank you personally for including me in this show. It is a dream. Vivian had shaken his hand warmly. Mr. Torres, your pieces are beautiful. The triptych especially. The use of light is stunning. They had talked for several minutes about his process, his inspiration, the artists who influenced him. He was talented, earnest, completely unaware that the woman he was talking to was worth 9 figures. He just saw someone who appreciated his art, who asked intelligent questions, who saw him. After he left to mingle with potential buyers, Marguerite had raised an eyebrow. He is handsome. Moraine, Vivian had said, laughing, I am just observing. Marguerite's eyes had twinkled, and he looked at you like you were the most interesting person in the room. Maybe because I was asking about his art, not his portfolio or his family connections. Exactly. Marguerite had kissed her goddaughter's cheek. You have learned to see people clearly, Sherry. Now make sure you let yourself be seen clearly too. The real you, not the version you think someone wants. She had drifted away into the crowd, leaving Vivian standing in her gallery, in her gown, in her life, the one she had built from the ashes of who she pretended to be. Across the room, Daniel Torres had looked back at her and smiled. Vivian had smiled back, and this time she knew exactly who she was smiling as. Herself. Fully, completely, unapologetically herself. 6 months after the gallery opening, a small announcement appeared in the business section of the Wall Street Journal. Archambault Collective names Vivian Crane as CEO. Marguerite Archambault, 74, announced her retirement and the appointment of her goddaughter, Vivian Crane, 32, as Chief Executive Officer of the Archambault Collective, overseeing a portfolio of luxury brands valued at $8.7 billion. Marguerite had said in a statement, "Vivian represents the future of thoughtful, ethical luxury. She has earned this role through dedication, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to excellence." The article had noted that Crane, formerly married to vintner Damien Beaumont, had been instrumental in the collective's recent expansion into North American wine country, including the successful rehabilitation of Crane Vineyard, formerly Beaumont Estates, in Napa Valley. When asked about her priorities as CEO, Crane had stated, "We will continue to build brands that honor craftsmanship, authenticity, and the dignity of every person who contributes to our success. Luxury should elevate everyone it touches, makers and consumers alike." The article included a photograph. Vivian standing in the vineyard at golden hour, vines heavy with grapes, wearing work clothes and a genuine smile. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. In a downtown apartment in San Francisco, significantly smaller than the penthouse he used to own, Damien Beaumont had read the article 3 times. His hands shook as he set down the newspaper. He looked around his apartment. 2 bedrooms. Nice enough, but nothing compared to the estate. Nothing compared to what he had lost. He had lost an empire to a woman he had treated like a servant, and she had taken that empire and built something better, something honest, something that had her name on it, not his. He picked up his phone, typed out a text to her number. "I am sorry. I was wrong about everything." He stared at it for a long time. His thumb hovered over the send button, but something stopped him. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the realization that some apologies come too late, that some bridges once burned stay ash, that some chances once lost do not come back. He deleted the message, put down his phone, and sat in his mediocre apartment, thinking about the woman he never really saw and the life he had thrown away because he was too blind to recognize a diamond when it was right in front of him. Meanwhile, in the vineyard, Vivian walked the rows with Daniel, her boyfriend of 4 months, the artist who had looked at her like she mattered long before he knew her title or her bank account. He held her hand as they walked between the vines, the late afternoon sun turning everything golden. "Tell me again about the old vines," he had said, and she described the gnarled ancient roots, the patient years of growth, the way sometimes the best fruit comes from the oldest, most resilient plants, the ones that survived because they knew their worth was in their roots, not in what others saw on the surface. She had finally learned that lesson, and she would never forget it again. Now, if this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, like this video if you believe in karma and justice. If you believe that people who underestimate others eventually pay the price. Second, subscribe to Stories with Mr. Parker for more inspiring narratives like this one. Stories that remind you of your worth. Stories that show you that justice, even when it is delayed, eventually comes. And third, share this with someone who needs to remember their value. Someone who has been made to feel small by people who should have cherished them. And here is what I want you to do right now. Comment the words, "I know my worth." Type it out. I know my worth. Let that be your declaration. Let that be your reminder. I want to see those comments flooded with people declaring their value, because that is what this story is really about. So comment right now. I know my worth. Let me leave you with 3 life lessons from Vivian's story. 3 truths that I hope you carry with you long after this video ends. Lesson number 1. Never erase yourself for anyone's comfort. Love, real love, should add to who you are, not subtract from it. If someone is asking you to be smaller, quieter, less than you are, that is not love. That is control. That is insecurity. And you deserve better. Vivian spent 4 years making herself smaller, hoping it would make her more lovable. But the truth is, the right people will love you more when you're fully yourself. Not the edited version, not the diminished version. The whole, complete, unapologetic you. Lesson number 2. People who do not value you do not deserve to know your worth. Vivian hid her identity because she wanted authentic love. But the lesson is deeper than that. Stop pouring into people who see you as empty. Stop trying to prove yourself to people who are determined not to see you. The Beaumont spent 4 years looking at a billionaire heiress and seeing a nobody. That was not a reflection of Vivian. That was a reflection of their blindness. Do not exhaust yourself trying to open the eyes of people who have chosen to be blind to your value. And lesson number 3. Your value is not determined by how others treat you. This is the most important one. Listen carefully. Vivian was always the heir to billions. Even when she was being treated like hired help, her worth did not change based on how Damien or Colette saw her. It was inherent. It was fixed. It was hers. The same is true for you. Your value is not up for debate. It is not determined by whether someone loves you back, whether you get the promotion, whether you are invited to the table. You are valuable because you exist. Period. Full stop. No conditions. The Beaumont spent 4 years looking at a diamond and seeing a rock. That did not change what Vivian was. It only revealed what they were. Blind, arrogant, foolish. Make sure you are not so busy judging people by their appearance, their job, or their status that you miss who they really are. And make sure you never forget who you really are, no matter how others treat you. Vivian walked away from people who made her feel worthless. And she walked into a life where she was finally seen, valued, and celebrated, not because she changed, but because she stopped accepting less than she deserved. That is the lesson. Know your worth. Protect your peace. And never, ever make yourself small for people who are determined to keep you that way. I am Mr. Parker, and I will see you in the next story. Until then, remember, you are valuable. You are worthy. And you deserve to be seen for exactly who you are. Know your worth.